Thank you, guys. I am humbled to be here, and I'm kind of like Jay. I have to write things down. The first thing is to say thank you and then tell you who I am. My name is Cindy Jackson, and I'm a very grateful member of the Worldwide Fellowship of Al-Anon and Al-Anon.
Hi, Cindy.
Hi, everybody. It's good to be here. It really is. And I want to thank the committee for asking me to speak today, because, you know, when I speak, I learn a lot. I learn a lot about myself, and I learn a lot about the program. And for that, I'm very grateful. The first time I was voluntold to speak, it was really crazy. Anyway, but I'm going to back up for a second, because I really like the way that AAs introduce themselves. I haven't had to have a drink since blah, 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 blah. Well, I have to share with you that I haven't had to slam a cupboard, throw a cake against the wall, or, yes, I did that, or smash pots and pans around since November. And we all come in early before the holidays. Most of us do anyway. Since November of 2007. And I'm very grateful for the lessons that I've learned since then, because I am a totally different person than I used to be. Now, I was voluntold for my first speaking engagement. My sponsor told me that I was going to speak at a recovery session for women. And being the person I am, I said, well, I'll think about it. And then I called her name. Now, you're telling your sponsor you're going to think about it. So I thought about it by sitting down on the couch and turning on the TV. Avoidance is one of my habits. And what was on was interesting. My granddaughters had been in the house, and they had it on the Disney Channel. Cinderella was on. Now, that is me. I will clearly, unequivocally admit I am the princess of my household. And here's Cindy and Cinderella. And the words that came out of her mouth were, the most fearful thing in the world is to be known for who you really are. That hit me like a ton of bricks. It slapped me up the side of the head, and I called my sponsor back and said, thank you for the opportunity to learn and for the opportunity to speak. As I progressed in the program, I understand that there's a second half to this being fearful thing. And what the program has taught me is that being known for who I am is very freeing. And I think both programs, we are so similar in our actions and our deeds that being known for who I am is loving and it's comforting instead of fearful. But it took many years to get there. So, you know, my job right now is to tell you about the way it was. And I grew up in a family that was upwardly mobile. We moved quite frequently, usually every 2 to 3 years. So what I found out is that the bag of rocks that I was collecting as I grew up were really misconceptions. They were my interpretation of what was going on based on me. And me. I'm the center of attention. I'm just greedy. I am all sorts of things like that. But what I learned from moving so frequently was that I didn't get close to anybody, because why bother? They're going to be gone. We're going to be gone in a little bit, and that's okay. They're just gone. And that was I developed that habit. When somebody was too close, I just walked. So don't get too close. First rock in the bag. Second rock in the bag was that I was responsible for a lot. Now, I was about 4, probably maybe 4 or 5 when this event happened. And it just struck me the other day, and I had forgotten all about this until I was speaking. But I'm responsible for the world. I'm responsible for the way you feel. I'm responsible for politics. I'm responsible, and I know a lot about a lot of stuff. Even if I don't know a lot about a lot of stuff, I have to make you think I know a lot about a lot of stuff, and I'm right. But that I'm responsible. I can remember being in the car with my 3 brothers, and I'm about 4 or 5, and I have 3 brothers following me. So I am the queen. No, I'm not the queen. That was my mom. I'm the princess, and these 3 kids are in the car with me, and I'm in charge because Mom had to run back into the house. Well, she thought the car was in park. It was in neutral, and the car started to back out of the driveway. And I'm terrified. Now, I've gone back and visited that house, and the driveway was probably as far from me to you. It wasn't far, and it wasn't a busy street, but I was scared. So I ran out, and I got in back of the car and pushed. Now, my higher power had a better plan for me because I thought I had stopped the car. The door was open to the passenger side, and it caught on the side of the house. Now we're screaming, "Mom, Mom, Mom, the car is moving." And she came out, and boy, did I ever get it. And I'm thinking, why is she so angry? I am a responsible person. I saved my brother's lives. And here she is spanking the tar out of me. And so, okay, I'm responsible, but I got to be careful, and I have to be right if I'm doing something. So, the other thing with my family was always look good. Always look good. So, here I am, I'm looking good for you. I didn't own a dress before this, by the way. I do now. And let me tell you, my first sponsor would be down here with great wrath if I did not have a dress on. And you did not want Barbara Priest to be on your case. I can say her whole name, she's gone now. But always look good. We were a very religious family, and there's a difference, obviously, that I learned later between being religious and being spiritual. Good example. Another rock to add to my bag. Look good. Driving to church on Sunday morning, the back seat, the 6-year-old says to the 4-year-old, "Put on your goddamn shoes." Now, a 6-year-old normally doesn't talk like that, but the shoes were put on, and we got to the church, and as soon as that door opened to the church and from the car to the church, you had a smile on your face, your shoes were on, whether they're damn shoes or shoes, they were on, and you were on your best behavior. And there were things you didn't say there that were said in the house. So to me, there was a real disconnect between religion and practice and behavior. And it was a disconnect that followed me for quite a while, especially into my wild years, or my non-connected years. And that bag went in the sack. That rock went in my sack. As following with religion, it's always best to be right. That was a mantra in my family. It was the best thing to be right. And we were, of course, always right. There was no way we couldn't be right because you had your opinions, but it didn't count. Your opinions didn't count. My opinions didn't count. There was one opinion in my household that counted, and guess who? That was Dad. You didn't cross the line. You didn't make a decision on your own. You did what you were supposed to do, and that was right. So, that rock is kind of heavy. My opinion was always right. Your opinion was maybe considered or listened to, but while you were talking, I was thinking of something else. I was thinking of how I was going to respond to you. Now I was thinking not how I'd respond to you. I was thinking how I would react to you. There's a big difference that I learned between responding and reacting. And that's sometimes a hard lesson to learn, because at the same time that my opinion is right, I needed to look good to you. I needed to be liked by you. So I'm a pretty good chameleon. If you speak this language, I can speak that language if I listen to you long enough, and I'm a good listener, so that I can blend in very easily. It's nice to listen. We learn to listen, but there's a difference between listening with my ears and listening with my heart. And that's one thing the Al-Anon program gave me, was the ability to listen with my heart. And we'll get into that in a little bit. I said my dad was the decision maker, technically. My mom went along with it, but she was the disciplinarian. Not a very nice person. But that's okay. When I was growing up, not being a nice person to me was kind of earth-shattering. It did not build my self-esteem, yet I learned how to deal with that in a very non-productive way, because I had to build my self-esteem through somebody else, and that was y'all. And to do that, I had to get to know you. I had to get you to like me. And part of that was self-sacrifice. There's another rock for the bag. I had to work myself to the bone for somebody else. I had to be so tired at the end of the day from doing good deeds for other people that I would just fall into bed. Not a healthy way to be, not a healthy way to live. Yet that's the way a lot of us grew up, that self-sacrifice is a good thing. The best thing you can do is self-sacrifice. It makes me a better person, makes me worthwhile. I have to earn my humanity. I have to earn the right to live. That's a tough one. That's a big rock in there. Now, to top it all off, I expect you to take care of me. Hey, my parents took care of me. I grew up in a nice home. It wasn't terrible. There was a lot of laughter. There was a lot of fighting. That was probably due to alcohol consumption. I've never come to the conclusion that my family was a dysfunctional alcoholic family. It wasn't. There were dysfunctional alcoholics within my extended family, but we all laughed. We all got together. We weren't folks that shot at each other or whatever. It was a nice, quiet home. It was a sense of humor. I came home one night and the garage door had no handle in it. The middle of the handle was out, so I went in and said, "Hey, what happened to the door?" And, "Oh my God, we've been broken into. What happened?" So the police come over, and he asked to see my mother's keys to the door. So, well, she pulls the keys out of her purse, and there's the doorknob hanging on the end. We all laugh. And the cop says, "Well, how do you spell your last name?" And my dad says, "Stupid." So, to me, drinking was normal. Drinking was fun. And it never got to be an irritating factor in our household while I was living there. So, here I go with my bag of rocks, and there are certain expectations within my family. I expect you to take care of me, and yet I don't want to really have you be in charge of me. The expectation in the family was that I would go away to college, I would be a teacher, I would marry a pastor, and I would have a career to fall back on if anything happened. Well, that's a tall order. And as I went away to college, what I understand now was that I did not have the ability to make decisions. They were always made for me, so I just kind of went with the flow. I had no boundaries because you needed to like me, and I had no world experience. I couldn't date till I was 16, and by that time I was halfway through my senior year, so in high school. So I had no nothing to really, that's my excuse, isn't it? I had nothing to base my decisions on. So off I go to college. And what I wanted to do was not be a teacher. My father was in the Navy in World War II, and he was just, he discharged himself from the reserves after a while. Actually, it's when Korea started because he had 4 kids by that time. But I wanted to be a Navy nurse. And I couldn't be a Navy nurse. I said, well, how about an Army nurse? No, because what my dad saw in the women that joined the armed services were loose women. And he didn't want me to be a loose woman. Well, when I went to college, it was in the 1960s. Now, there's more than one way to be a loose woman, I did find that out. He did not, thank goodness. Well, maybe he did, and he just kept it to himself. But there's just more than one way. And in the 1960s and early 70s, I started college in 67. I finished my degree in 1984. So, there's a lot of time in there. There's a lot of time for extracurricular activities and for adjusting to the life of independence. Now, I've had 4 major significant others in my life. And if I have had a significant interchange with you and you're out there, I apologize to you that you aren't in the top 4. But, you really did not want to be in my top 4 because if you are, you're kind of sick and you need some recovery. You need a lot of recovery because so did I. I did notice that all of the people I dated or went out with were either adult children of alcoholics or were alcohol and drug dependent themselves. Why? Because you're fun. You're a lot of fun. And it stays fun until the gorilla starts to take over. And you're in the cage and you can't get out. So my first significant person ended up being my first husband. I met him under a piano at Abbott Hall at the University of, Michigan State University. Now, I was the one under the piano drinking heavily, so of course he was attracted to me, being an adult child, for sure. And we had a lot of fun. And I'm a person that liked chaos. I don't like chaos anymore, but chaos meant it was exciting. Chaos meant I could be at the middle of it. As a matter of fact, he made a comment after we didn't break up, I left. So I have to be honest about that. He made a comment that I always need to be at the center of things. And at the time, I was really offended. I thought, no, I don't have to be at the center of things, but yes, I did. As I went through my program of recovery, and we have a program of recovery too, that's very serious, I learned, I'd stir stuff up. I like it. It gave me meaning, but at the same time, it gave me a lot of pain. And I had to learn how to separate those two things. So here we are, early or late 60s. We're both drinking, doing drugs, and there's a lot of similarity between Al-Anons and my behavior and alcoholic behavior. I like to drink, I like to use outside issues, did that heavily through most of my career until I moved to Arkansas. Then I didn't know anybody. But my first husband was a draft resistor. Now, that's odd that this is Veterans Day. Yet, the only reason he resisted is because he was a conscientious objector and he was denied. He did eventually get his alternative service, and that was wonderful. So he could serve in a different way. But what happened with me was that the chaos was gone. There was nothing else going on in that relationship, and I walked away. That's pretty sad, but I didn't recognize that in myself at the time, that I was living on chaos. I was getting that adrenaline rush. So I left with a person that was very emotionally fragile. And I did not realize that, or didn't want to see it at the time. And this person is not in my top 4, but he did seriously try to kill me by choking me. And just my higher power watches out for me. He doesn't leave me. But as his hands were just choking the tar out of me, I'd taken martial arts classes, and all I did was raise my hands up and knee him in the groin. And it let that grip go. And we both started to cry and try to, soothe each other. This is how crazy my world was. I didn't call the cops. I didn't make him leave. His bus wasn't leaving until the next morning. So I let him stay, because poor guy, he was feeling badly. Now, that's just not right in my head. I can understand how women stay in an abusive relationship. I didn't have the self-worth to say, adios, I'm out of here. No, or you're out of here. So he stayed, nothing else happened, and I moved on. So did he. One thing he did threaten to do was kill himself if I didn't come with him. And I at least had the sense not to go with him. He did try, he did not succeed, and at that time, I didn't understand that he could make his own choices, and they were his choices, not mine. Friends told me that, but at the time, I was awfully hard-hearted, and I just didn't care. It was his deal, not my deal. I'm moving on. And generally when I moved on, I never looked back. Didn't look back. So, where do you go from there? I was working a job that was a multi-state job for a church, a religious organization. How I ever got into that, I don't know, but I did. And I moved on to a job, earth shoes. I became the manager of an earth shoe factory. I loved it. I had position. I was managing. I could manipulate people and set their schedules and everything. It was great. But earth shoes were it was a shoe that had a recessed heel so you could stand up straight, and it was the best thing ever. So what happened at the earth shoe store? I met my child's father. Hey, and I have to tell you, I am colorblind. I can see these oranges and these fall colors, but when it comes to a relationship, I do not see red flags. And they could be big as this podium, and I would not get it. Don't see those flags. The nice thing about this town was that there was a federal prison a few miles down the road. You know where this is going. Well, they have work release programs for nonviolent offenders. Well, define nonviolent offenders. This means they're into drugs. But they were not violent. They weren't carrying guns. They weren't doing anything but transporting across state lines, because that's what gets you in a federal prison. And one of the men working on my store was one of these work release guys who introduced me to his friend. And he was so good looking. And he was so nice. And he was so much fun. He was an adult child of an alcoholic. And he was his mom's enabler. But that meant nothing to me. When he was telling me about his mom and his family, it really didn't mean anything to me, but he was fun. So by the time he was released from prison, we were in a relationship. I know. It was in my head. Now, I really like Calvin and Hobbes, and I like The Far Side. The way I lived my life at this time was like this Far Side cartoon. There's two ladies are driving down the road together, and they see a hitchhiker. This hitchhiker has hair that hasn't been washed in 3 weeks. He's got a hook for a hand, a peg leg, a patch over his eye, and his sign says, "Anywhere." And the lady who's driving looks at the other lady and says, "Let's take a risk." Yeah, it seems perfectly logical. That was my life. That was my life. Hey, he looks like fun. We moved from Michigan to Colorado, his home, and the resentments and the just dysfunction started to grow. And wherever you are. And I brought my bag of rocks with me. And it's getting pretty heavy by this time. But that does not matter to me. And my resentment rock grows. My relationship rock sinks. But I kept with it. We had 2 pregnancies and 1 child. And his definition of relationship was a lot different than my definition of relationship. Now, my definition of relationship is formed on denial. I'm very, very picky about the reality I choose to make. And the reality that I choose is very often not what really is. Accepting life on life's terms is not in my vocabulary. I do not know what life is. I know what I want, and I know how to look at it from the perspective of what I want. Everything Jay said, I could stand up here and say what he said is right on, it's perfect in a dysfunctional way, because that's the way life was. So we have this baby, and I know that this is going to cement our relationship. He will love me, and he will love this baby, and he will stay. No. At that time, I'm not really an oil field groupie, but he was working in the oil fields, and that's a lot of fun. You go from place to place, you experience different people, different things, and there's a lot of drugs and alcohol after the work is done. So we're very happy, we're very busy, we're very loaded, and we're very dysfunctional. So what happens in dysfunction is he messes up. I find out what he's really doing. I settled down in Ogden, Utah at that time so I could go to school. And of course I pick a helping profession. I go to school for 2 years in nursing, and during that time we're still having this relationship. He comes home on weekends and goes home. Well, I find out through one of his friends that he's living with somebody else in another state. I am totally offended, blah, blah, blah. Yet I don't realize I'm doing the same thing. We're both cheating. Yet I don't see my end of the deal. I see his end of the deal. So how do I solve it? I leave. I say goodbye. Don't open the door again. As a matter of fact, I didn't even have any contact with him for several years. Although he did try to come back into the relationship as a father, and eventually he was able to do that. As a matter of fact, it's kind of, well, it's not funny, haha, but just this past year, I did finally make my amends to him. Now our child is going to be 46 this year, so, you know, it took me a while to get to that. And you know what, the wonderful thing is I did get there.
Right.
Through the program, I got there eventually. He was still living, and I got to make my amends via telephone. Now, my son did warn me, Mom, he's not changed. I said, well, I'm not into it for that. I just need to talk to him and make some amends. I felt so much better after making those amends. Did he make amends to me? No. And I did not expect it. And that's the beauty of the program. It didn't matter to me if he made amends or not. I could clear my side of the street. And that felt wonderful. But I'm kind of getting ahead of the story here. You know, I left for another oil field person who worked with him. That relationship was not very long lived. It was very tumultuous because he truly was. Now I was into my phase of dating alcoholics who are also addicts. So that tells you a lot because he was pretty far down the road. And it was not a healthy relationship. That was my cake throwing episode, by the way. I really did it. It was Mother's Day, and he informed me I wasn't his mother, and give a flying about Mother's Day, and that cake went flying. Of course, I had to clean up my own mess, which was somewhat predictable. To me, cleaning up my own mess was something I needed to learn to do. And that event really helped me as I was moving through my Al-Anon program. I had to clean up that mess, and I resented cleaning up that mess, and I resented cleaning up him too, because he wouldn't do it. Well, what did I expect? I can't change other people, but I didn't know that at that point. I was trying my best to create a better life for him, create a better life for us, and it just doesn't work that way. We both had to get to our bottoms, and once again, I left. Now this time was a little bit different. It was Thanksgiving, and I went to visit my parents. I had not seen them for several years. My mother was thrilled when my son was born. She was a grandma. And I didn't have the heart to tell her that we were not married, so I just lied. I said, oh yeah, we're married. We got married because I was pregnant. And she was such a proud grandma. And she loved that boy. And we went to Arkansas for Thanksgiving. Now I'm coming from Colorado, driving to Arkansas, and I'm thinking, why in the heck did you move here? Well, it looks like a lot like where they grew up, and there was fishing and there was golf, and they were happy as pigs in mud. Well, I didn't know they had a plan. So when I was here, we went and visited some schools, and I found out that I could finish my nursing degree in 1.5 years instead of 3 years like it would take me back in Utah. So I made another geographical move. I moved from, my stuff was stored in Utah, and my parents came out there. I did not realize how much they cared for me. You know, I was gone for a good 10 years without contacting them before my son was born. And now as a parent, I realize how much that must have hurt. But they came and got me. My higher power has never left me. And it's never left me alone either. But that's a good thing. So they came out, we loaded my stuff. Excuse me, I moved to Arkadelphia. And I knew I'd moved to hell. Because I moved from a place with no fleas, no ticks, no chiggers, no scroiling humid heat, to Arkadelphia in August. It was horrible. I, I should tell you this. I even went to the doctor. We had sat down and had a picnic, my son and I, and sat in the grass. Well, I got chiggers, didn't know what they were, and so I went to the doctor. I said, I haven't done anything, but I have these things all over me and in places that I didn't want to mention, and he just laughed, introduced me to the concept of chiggers. So that was my introduction to the state. I really did swear I'd move after I graduated, but I didn't. Because I met the one who was just perfect for me. And it was quite by accident, you know, when you're growing up a kid. And let me back up a little bit. One of the reasons I decided to come to Arkansas was for the welfare of my child. At one point, he had taken a dollar bill, rolled it up, and sniffed it across the table. This is at 4 years old. That was the act that made me realize that this child was growing up wrong. He did not need to be around drugs. He did not need to be around people who were drinking to excess. And I was the responsible person, and I am, remember, I got that rock in my sack. I am the responsible person. So I had to do an actually healthy, responsible thing and get out of that behavior. Now, I'm blessed with the fact that I do not have the addiction gene. So I took my little vial, I filled it with water, I drank it, and I threw it away. That was it. I didn't have to look back. I didn't crave. I didn't need alcohol or drugs anymore. But I had to move to keep that little boy safe. So it was a geographical move. Did it work as far as drugs and alcohol were concerned? Yes, for me it worked. But I still had my bag of rocks. So wherever I am, there I am, and there I am with my bag of rocks. So, you know, when you're growing up a kid, you go to soccer games, you go to t-ball games and all of this, and I got to know the other parents, and I was a threat sometimes because I was a single parent. And, you know, this was 40 some years ago, and I was good looking. It was fun. I gave in to a friend who was running this singles club thing. And I better hurry up here. And I just said, okay, I'll go one time. And there was a fellow there who I did not know was divorced, and he was very nice, he was very polite, he was well liked by everyone, and we had the same sense of humor. And I'll share this with you. We were playing trivia, and my question was, does Uranus have an aurora? And being the person I am, I just blurted it out that it just depends on what I ate the night before. And he's the only one that laughed. So we got along fine. And we were married. We were married for 30 years before he passed away. He passed away in 2020 of cancer. But you know what? It was good. We had good times and bad times, but I knew within the first week that I had done the same thing I always do. I had married an alcoholic. He did not use drugs, but I had married an alcoholic, so I had to think very seriously, do I want to stay in this relationship, or do I want to just have it annulled after a week? But you know what? I am responsible. I can make things happen. I needed him to care for me. We had 2 incomes now, and we had a house, and oh, all right. And you know what? I could change him if I could just love him enough. That's my reality. I couldn't change him. We both had to get to our bottoms. And by the time that I came to Al-Anon, I have to say, I really was on my knees. I didn't want to go to Al-Anon. My cardiologist said I was having heart issues and they couldn't find out why. Any medication I took was not working. And luckily, I had a woman who sat me down finally and said, tell me about your life. What's going on in your life, in your family? So I told her, and I was honest for the first time in my life. And she said, we have this little prescription pad that we give to doctors. And she tore one off and wrote it for me, and it was go to Al-Anon. Go to Al-Anon. I'm thinking, Al-Anon, what the heck? Nothing wrong with me. Nothing wrong with my family. So I thought about it. The way I always think about it, I go do something else. I decided that in the church I was going to, there's a thing called Stephen's Ministry, which is walking beside someone who's having trouble. I am great at that. I can do that. So I sign up and I'm flying to Orlando for these training sessions. And we get stuck in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm there standing in line thinking, and I'm talking out loud, I need to get to Orlando. I can't miss my flight. I am the most important person in this line, blah, blah, blah. And the lady in front of me turns around and she kind of makes room for us to make face-to-face contact, and she says, you know, I go on cruises with my friends because my husband doesn't travel well. And she proceeded to tell me a little bit about her life and her husband, and whose drinking bothered her, and it didn't work well on the cruise. And she's a member of Al-Anon. Well, you know what? The plane gets there to Orlando with no problem, on time, and I don't miss anything, because she's going on this cruise, and the airline knows it has to pay their way to the first stop, if their first port, if they don't make their connection. So of course we get there in time and they all run away. So I get to my conference and my roommate has these books on her bedside table. Yeah, Hope for Today, Courage to Change, and ODAT. She has her daily readers. She's in Al-Anon. I hate her guts because she's wearing these nice little sundresses. She walks up and down. We're on the 4th floor. She walks up and down the stairs. I don't know what's wrong with her. So anyway, I get downstairs and we go to a table for the seminar. It's a round table. The woman sitting next to me is in Al-Anon. But she's a biker chick, so I like her. And we talk. And I kind of get the idea that God is giving me a nudge. Well, I need a 2x4, and that's what God was doing, is saying, hey, follow through, go. And honestly, that's where my miracle started to happen, because my higher power, and I can word this 2 different ways, my higher power loves me enough to not let me go. Now, that could be an irritant, which it was when I was active, and not displaying very good behavior. Let's put it that way. Never leave me alone. What a blessing. What a blessing. And, as I went through the program, as I go through the Al-Anon program, I have to think a couple things. What makes me a grateful member? What makes me an active member? Well, it's the fact that I go to meetings. Number 1, go to meetings. And I'm not saying go to a meeting a week. I go to about 4, a couple on Zoom and 2 in person, because I learn that way, because I have to stay in contact with you to see good behavior demonstrated and to be able to imitate that. I sponsor people, and I have a sponsor, and I use my sponsor. This is a doing program for me. I can't just sit here and absorb. I can't just sit here and wail my story out, because my story is nothing compared to some other people. But that doesn't matter. Comparisons get me in trouble. So I sponsor people. I have a sponsor. I use a sponsor in service. I do service because when I can serve, I can learn, I can grow. And I got to thinking the other day, what time is it? Oh, good. I got to thinking the other day, and I become obsessed with the 12th step. And I can probably just step back right now and say what Jay said. What Jay said was right on the ticket. And he said it so beautifully. I used to be very articulate because I thought I knew everything, and I know everything. I don't. And I learned that I don't know everything. But the 12th step says, having had a spiritual awakening. Now, it's not a spiritual event, but it's a spiritual awakening. So I took baby steps to get there. But I had to ask myself finally, what does a spiritual awakening look like? What do I look like if I had a spiritual awakening? Well, the first thing I had to say is, I can smile. And a smile, I read somewhere, and most of what I tell you is not original for me, except for my story of growing into this. It's how I use the tools of the program. So a smile is the outward appearance of inside me is okay. It's not an inappropriate smile, it's a genuine smile. It's a faith that's inside that everything will be okay. What else? What else is my spiritual awakening? And I wrote some of this stuff down because I don't want to forget it. And I do forget stuff now, I have to admit it. But it's spontaneous gratitude. I can be driving down the street and look at the clouds and think, oh my God, how gorgeous, thank you. I can be here looking at your faces and say, thank you. It's a sign of spiritual awakening that I can be grateful. Before I was just spitting on things. Now I can really, truly be grateful, not only in my head, but in my heart. One of my biggest spiritual awakenings is, the sign of it is worrying. It's worrying less. I don't have to worry about my grandkids. I don't have to worry about my son who's still out there. I had a husband and 2 sons whose drinking bothered me, and whose drinking bothered everybody else too. And I don't have to worry about them, because God took care of them himself. Now I have one who's still writing his story, and that's okay, because I know his God will watch him just like my God takes care of me. And when I backed out of trying to fix that family, hey, guess what? They got better. Those kids know. They know when Dad is sick, or if they know Dad is sick. They think it's sad that he can't say I love you without being drunk, but that's okay. Their family's their family, and the thing that binds us all together is love. Our oldest son got sober about 5 years before my husband did, and he used to come over and leave books around. You know how we do. We leave books around. Oh, maybe he'll read this. Maybe he'll get a sudden awakening. But the sudden awakening did come without me, which was a resentment for a while. Because how could you get better when I've tried so hard? Martyrdom left too. That's another sign of spiritual awakening, is I can drop the martyr role. I don't have to be that long-suffering person. I don't have to suffer at all. As a matter of fact, one of my spiritual awakenings is learning that I have choices. Man, what a concept. I can choose to have a good day, or I can choose to just, I don't feel good when I wake up. That used to be a sign that nobody in that household was going to be happy that day. And that was the doggone truth, because I could make you miserable. Now, I've also learned that nobody makes me miserable. I make myself miserable. You don't make me get mad at you. You're being yourself. I choose anger. I choose happiness. I choose to accept you as a person for who you are. And that's the great thing that I learned in this program, and that's acceptance and attitude. That what the doctor wrote on acceptance is right on. It is so correct. Yet I have to be willing to accept. I have to be willing to change my attitude. I have to be willing to make those little things. When I first came to Al-Anon, I don't remember my first meeting. I do. I don't have any clue what was said. But I knew I wanted it. I knew what I wanted, what those losers had. I mean, to me, 12 steps, 12 weeks, let's get it over, let's graduate. These people had been there 30 years, and I'm thinking, for God's sakes, haven't you learned anything? Well, yeah, they had. And I learned, too, that I take it in baby steps, and I had to take it in baby steps. My second meeting, there was nobody there. But man, I wanted it, and I knew where their books were. And I had to be there because I had to drive my husband to his meeting because he couldn't drive yet. So I dug out those books and I started to read. And I became willing, and I became able to take those baby steps. So what did I do? You know what? It's better to start my day by bringing my husband coffee and by kissing him on the forehead and saying, "Good morning," and leaving it at that. Normally I would have been banging pots and pans around and huffing and puffing because I knew he had a headache, and I was just going to make that headache worse because he deserved it. Nah. I needed to recognize him as an individual and everybody around me for who they were, children of God. Whatever God is your God, you're a child of God. And I need to respect that. I learned respect. I learned that just simply giving a cup of coffee and shutting my mouth and kissing you on the forehead was good. Was it fake it till you make it? Probably. But you know what? If you fake it long enough, you make it. And it becomes part of me. I found that being human, I used to think being human was an excuse. I'm only human. Well, yeah, I am only human, and it's a good thing. I'm part of the human race. I will make mistakes, and the only mistake that's a bad mistake is one I don't learn from. And I expect to make mistakes, and I expect to move on, I expect to move forward, and I have a whole pile of people I can call if I need to help me define what I need to change from that mistake. Jay mentioned a pause, and I think that's really valuable to me. One of the lessons I learned was to pause before I act. It's putting that faith in my higher power between me and what I might want to do in reacting to what you've said. Now, my knee-jerk reactions, they were terrible. And I'm a jerk enough, and I don't have to use my knees half the time. But if I put that 4-second pause between sticking my higher power between me and that decision, it turns out to be a much better decision. It might be 4 seconds, it might be 4 days, but I do not have to hurry. I do not have to decide at that moment. I can call my higher power, I can call my Al-Anon friends and get a much better choice in how I act. What I've learned in this program, and I've taken up an hour, I can't believe it. You probably can, your rear ends can. What I've learned in this program is how to act as a woman of grace with dignity and respect for other people, and for that I will always be grateful to every single one of you. Thank you.